100 years of the Mount Mansfield Auto Toll Road. History by Brian Lindner, Stowe Mountain Resort historian. Read for Stowe Mountain Resort by Scott Brayton. About 13,000 years ago, a massive glacier covering all of Vermont began to melt and recede, leaving in its path what we now call Mount Mansfield, Vermont's highest peak. At 4,395 feet, Mansfield is one of the major mountain peaks in New England. Indigenous peoples used the mountain as a hunting ground, and their trails accessed the remote region long before roads were carved up the slope. European settlers began to arrive in the area in the 17th and 18th centuries, and for these new settlers, the mountain was a wasteland, not suitable for farming. Although Native Americans and settlers occasionally hiked to the mountain summit out of curiosity, such excursions were rare because life was hard and there was little time for recreation. But in the mid-19th century, all that began to change. Settlers started to accumulate wealth and had leisure time. People began to look at Mount Mansfield as much more than a wasteland. In 1850, a narrow horse trail was cut up the mountain, and it became so popular that, according to Mount Mansfield historian Robert Hagerman, 3 years later, in 1853, locals decided to widen and improve the trail. Now, a road was suitable for horse-drawn wagons and carriages. Next, the first hotel on the mountain was built under the direction of local businessman H. Bingham. This was a log cabin known as the Halfway House. The trail was upgraded and ended at Bingham's new halfway house, located near today's Mountain Chapel. In 1859, the Mount Mansfield Turnpike Company was chartered by the Vermont legislature. This legal entity began collecting fees to use the trail and eventually became one of the founding organizations of Stowe Mountain Resort. The next year, the Summit House was moved about 1/2 mile uphill along the extended carriage trail that ended under the nose of Mount Mansfield. Interesting fact, the ridgeline of Mount Mansfield has often been described as having the attributes of a human face: a forehead, nose, upper lip, lower lip, chin, and Adam's apple. Now, H. Bingham realized he was on the verge of creating a destination resort, and, according to the history written by Robert Hagerman, raised $90,000 from 9 investors to develop the Summit House and its surrounding infrastructure. In 1859, Bingham incorporated the Mansfield Motel Company, which eventually became Stowe Mountain Resort. By the next year, his Summit House could accommodate 80 guests. The toll road had finally reached its full length of 4.5 miles from end to end. In 1860, a plan to ascend Mount Mansfield by steam engine died on the drawing board, and afterward, the Civil War curtailed activity on the mountain. But the Vermont Central Railroad recognized commercial opportunities to bring wealthy folk from faraway cities to Mount Mansfield. The identity of Stowe, as we know it today, began to form. Significant funding by the railroad upgraded the carriage trail into a proper road, the toll road. By the 1910s, at least 6 logging camps operated in the area using the toll road. On July 4th, 1908, George B. Milne of Barry drove his 30-horsepower Haynes auto up the toll road with 3 passengers. One fearful passenger refused to ride back down. On February 1st, year of 1914, Dartmouth College librarian Nathaniel Goodrich became the first documented person to ski down the toll road. Skiing had arrived on Mount Mansfield. In 1922, local logger Craig Burt Sr., according to Hagerman, oversaw the task of overhauling the entire road to adapt it for automobile use. Harry Merrill, commissioner of the Vermont Department of Forests and Parks, later wrote that improvements to accommodate automobiles cost $80,000. History shows that work was finally completed in 1923, marking this year as the 100th anniversary of automobile access to the Mount Mansfield Toll Road. We celebrate that history as you listen to this and perhaps ride along the toll road. In 1932, the earliest attempt at commercial skiing came to Stowe. Craig Burt Sr. renovated one of his logging camps called Ranch Camp into primitive lodging for skiers. For the first time, skiers began to commonly hike up and ski down the toll road. Today, one of the most enduring and famous ski races in America is run every year on the toll road, the Stowe Derby. It originated on February 28, 1945, almost 80 years ago. The ski race began as a contest between alpine and Nordic-style skiers, with the primary rule being that you must finish the race on the same skis on which you started. The Derby begins near the Mount Mansfield summit and traditionally ends in the village of Stowe, several miles below. The race continues to this day, often with the racers in costume or sometimes even using vintage gear. The toll road began as a horse trail in the wilderness in the 1850s, was the scene of the earliest commercial skiing in Stowe, opened for automobiles in 1923, became a famous race trail in 1945, and still serves today as one of the resort's most popular ski trails in winter and is a leading guest attraction in summer and autumn. Enjoy the Mount Mansfield Toll Road in its 100th year.